Hello and welcome back to the Kitchen Table Modelers Workshop. My name's Ian and this is my modelling bench where I do all my work. So as you can see over my left shoulder, I've got a new kit review for you. Just a bit of prefix, I suppose. It was my birthday a little while ago and my family all clubbed together, got me a modelling voucher which I duly spent, and this was the biggest kit I bought because I really fancied building this. So it's the ICM 148 scale JU88 Mistel. A really interesting concept, I suppose, if you think about World War II and guided aerial munitions. Very advanced, but if you hark forward to certain conflict areas of today, there's a few similarities about guided aerial munitions with drone strikes and whatnot. So in some respects, the Luftwaffe of World War II were quite well ahead of the curve. However, if you counter that with the amount of resource that goes into producing one of these aircraft just to blow it up, well, you could debate this for quite some time. But it's a really interesting kit. Now, I was aware that ICM had produced the Mistel trainer aircraft that was still a cockpitted JU88 with the BF-109 Parasite aircraft on the back, and this is the actual bomb version, not bomber, because we know the JU88 was a bomber, but this is the JU88 converted with the active warhead instead of the cockpit. And as soon as I saw it available, I thought I really would love to get that kit, and then happened to be that I had a birthday and things worked out, the stars aligned, and this kit was purchased. So I got this from Scale Model Shop online. I can't recommend that seller high enough. I've bought a lot of kits from them and their service is exemplary. I've also bought a lot of my tools and supplies from them and the service is exemplary. So I'm not getting a paid promotion from them, but when I do encounter good service, I do like to pass it on. So if you're in the market for this kit or any other kits, do take time to drop along their website. I don't think you'll be disappointed at all. But that's enough for me. Let's get the kit on the table. We'll get the camera down on the table and we'll have a look and we'll see what we get inside the box. So we're on the desk. I've got a bit of glare from my studio lights. So we've got ICM's 148 scaled Mistel 1 kit number 48100. There is some blurb on the side. Whether you can read that or not, I don't know. It's terrible with the white against the colour, but basically made in Ukraine by ICM Holdings, 14 years and over. If we go to the end, it's just a repeat of the top picture, but if we go on the far side, then we've got the three colour options for the Mistel and the BF-109. Now, ICM, if I can get the lid off, make fantastic boxings. Oh, this one's not too bad. Sometimes the lids are a little hard to get off. So you get an outer sheath and then you get this really nice hard white cardboard box, opening lid with all the packaging inside. And there's quite a lot of plastic in there. So we've got the instructions and then we've got a whole number of frames and, would you believe, a bit of advertising for ICM paints. So something interesting. So we're going to start with instructions and then we'll move on to the plastic. So I'm not going to go into the history, but if you do want to get a bit more history about this aircraft, then there's a fellow called Peter Oxley who has a YouTube channel who has done a review of this aircraft as well, and he goes into a little bit more of the detail with regards to history, so I recommend you go and have a look at his. Starting from my review though, we've got, as usual with ICM, we've got the frame layout, and there's a lot of blanked out parts here that we're not going to need to use because we are not using the cockpit front end. This is going to be a bomb, so there'll be no cockpit, which is really good if you want a simple construction. All the cockpit glazing not needed. Bomb gondolas not needed. Some of the engine nacelles not needed. And then we've got new frames here. We've got parts for the cradle for the aircraft, and then we've actually got the bomb itself, and then we've got the BF-109 F4 frames, which is a kit I actually don't know very much about at all when it comes to ICM. I'm assuming it will be okay. It'll be one of their earlier kits, but it still should be pretty good. Starting in then, part one, we've got major surgery. We're cutting off the front of the airframe, just in front of the wing. So we're taking the front section of the wing off and all the cockpit section. We're building in the undercarriage, putting in the, I'm sure that's identification friend or foe, the German version of it. And then we've got this radio bulkhead, but we're taking all the radio detail off. So this bulkhead is purely going in to hold the front of the frame positionally correct. Then it goes on to the underwing section. And then 5, 6, 7, and 8, we're making up the warhead for the aircraft. This gets joined onto the front of the aircraft, and then we're moving on to the ailerons and the vertical tail stabilizer. Ailerons going onto the horizontal stabilizers, wings, and then bringing it all together. So this, within 17 parts, you're going to have a completed Ju-88 Mistel. Really quite quick construction. Then we're moving on to the flaps, the tail control surfaces, and then the ailerons flaps are being brought together onto the wings, and they will be positionable. So if it's on the ground, you may well be able to pose it with flaps drooped and put some deflection into the control surfaces if you choose to do so. 22 and on, we're looking at the undercarriage, which is quite substantial for this kit. And I have built this kit before, and it does go together very well, and the undercarriage is very stout, so there's going to be no problem with the extra weight of the BF-109 on the back of it. So undercarriage being complete and going together. And then we're moving into the engines. Now the engines, you can either build to detail them, or you can just build them so they get the propeller placement right, and just put the whole kit together, and you won't see the engines, so you don't need to do anything with them. It's entirely up to the builder. I probably usually prefer to build these things completely closed up, so when I do come to build this, I'll not be putting much detail in the engine other than what's basically necessary. But moving from basically parts 33 through to 51, we've got any more on this side yet? So basically right through till 61 you're building the engines up, so that's quite a bit of work. There's quite a few bits and pieces, shrouded exhausts, radiator louvers to build in, but they do build up to really nicely detailed engine nacelles. Part 62, you're bringing the nacelles onto the wings with the undercarriage in place, and then 63 and on is bringing the propellers and the main undercarriage together, and that will be the bulk of the build. You've got a few actuators to go in at part 66. 67, you've got the main undercarriage wheel well doors, and then we move on to the second part of the build, which is the BF-109 F4. Starting with the cockpit, moving through to the engine, following through the engine, bringing the engine to the cockpit, bringing it all together before we then bring that into the fuselage side. Detailing up the fuselage sides, bringing in the front engine covers, and marrying that up with the wings. A reasonably quick build. BF-109s tend to be quite simple. A little bit of detail work again. If you want to build the engine covers off, you can. If you're like me, I'll be building it together and then painting it up separate. So working together, we've got the canopy going in, a little bit of armor shield going into the actual main canopy, front armor glass, air intake, front radiator and grille, front slats, leading edge slats for the wings, underwing radiators and flaps, more flaps, and then undercarriage. Now if you're building this on top of the Mistel, the undercarriage will be up, which will make it easier to paint, but you will have to paint the wheel wells first as well as the wheels, and then mask them off before you paint the rest of the underside. So it will be a little bit of work, but nothing that's insurmountable. And then we're moving on to the hole placement. Now this is something that in some kits, for example, like Tamiya, they would probably have pre-molded sealed holes that you just have to punch through. Here it looks like we're going to have to do a bit of measuring to make sure we get all the hole placement correct for the support cradle for the BF109 to go on top of the Mistel. And it probably doesn't help that much in the fact that you've still got the original cockpit here, when in reality when you're trying to measure these holes you're going to have the warhead on. So a little bit of careful measurement to do here. It'll be interesting when I look at the parts to see if they've got any of these sort of pre-molded holes in that you just need to poke through with the correct size drill bit. But a bit of work there and some measuring and time taken to get it right will mean a huge advantage when it comes to putting it together and getting the correct alignment of all the support cradles. But once that's done, they all get glued in and you bring the two aircraft together. In reality, you're going to have to paint both aircraft, you're going to have to decal at both aircraft and weather them, bearing in mind that they probably won't be very heavily weathered because these will be one-time users, so they may not actually be that dirty at all. And then we've got a nice decal sheet we'll have a look at in a moment. A final overall view of what you get, and then we've got the paint schemes. So we've got our overall splinter cap pattern green with our probably RLM 65 underside, but don't quote me on that, so I'll need to see what the paint codings say. Option 1, option 2, they're all very similar. They're all, so option 1 is, so we've got June 1944, so we're looking at D-Day maybe. We've got summer 1944 France. We've got autumn 1944 for option 3, and they're all a very, very similar pattern. And then we move on to the BF109. So again, option 1, June 1944, option 2, summer 1944, and then option 3, autumn 1944. And of these, they're overall grey with mottling. It's quite a simple, well, it can be difficult to do, but it's going to look really, really nice when it's done. You've got quite a plain one, you've got a yellow banded aircraft, and then the final one, you've got yellow band, red insignia and tips, which may be the one I'll do because it's just that little bit more interesting. So there's the instructions. Quite simple, quite in depth though, but quite, simple done. The decals, again, ICM decals are lovely. They go down very, very well. They're a nice satin finish, very, very minimal carrier film. They're all in register, and you don't need any harsh decal setting solutions to get them to work. Simple decal solutions like Microcell and Microset will work. Right, give me a moment and we'll get the plastics out and we'll have a look at them. Okay, so the plastic is on the desk and we have 3 distinctive packages of plastic. We've got the 2 frames of the BF109 kit, which we'll put to one side for a moment. We've got the Mistel parts, there's 2 frames of that, and then we've got a huge bag of JU88 parts. So let's just crack on and open up the JU88 parts. Now ICM, a bit like Airfix, they're all in one bag together, so a bit of care is needed to get it out. However, the bags have got plastic seals on them, so it's nice. And we have a lot of frames here. This is the JU88 is a big aircraft in 1/48 scale. And I'll not bother getting the canopies out because we don't need them, which is great because you've got them for your spares box. And believe you me, that's a handy thing to have. Right, so taken from the top, the first sprue we've got is the wings. Now these are beautifully, beautifully done. ICM use a slightly softer plastic. It's a little reminiscent of Airfix maybe. If I can get that to stand up, I don't want to stand. I need to organise my desk a bit better. Yeah, a little reminiscent of Airfix. And it's that slightly soft grey plastic, but it's actually really nice to work with. And as I said, I've built the JU88 before, and this kit goes together like a dream. So I have no problems with it whatsoever. So we've got the wing upper and the wing lower, and there's no real molded detail on the inside, and there's no real great problems with any excessive ejector pin marks. We've got nice location pin marks for alignment. The surface detail, you can see in the light, is, I get a bit closer, is lovely. So we've got all the hatches molded in. We've got some very, very fine and constant panel lines on the upper and lower surfaces. And if you want to go to town to actually put rivets into this plastic will take rivet detail really, really nicely. So there's the wings. Now, we have got multiples of sprues. We'll sort them out. I'm going to deal with the larger ones first because they're the ones that want to fall over all the time. I should have thought about this a bit better. There we go. Right, so I'll set those to one side. So this is a sprue with the engine nacelles. We've got the dive brakes here. We have propellers, wheels, rear undercarriage tail wheel. We've got engine bulkheads. We have the front radiator assembly if I turn it over. We have one or two ejector pin marks in some of these detail parts, but the actual wheel well doors are free of ejector pins, which is really nice. The vertical tail here is really nice, and if we look at the detail on the bulkhead itself, it's nicely crisply molded, and we'll be able to pick that out and enhance that when we build up the wheel wells. All in all, quite nice. Now, I didn't actually note on the instructions when these were tooled. I made the mistake of not looking on ScaleMates to see when the tooling was either. I don't see it embossed in any of these parts, which is a shame. I don't think it's a really old tooling. So this is the fuselage, the main fuselage parts. Bearing in mind we are going to be cutting this aircraft along the front here. I don't know if there's a defined panel line. I think there maybe is actually. So it's going to be cut off just in front of where this bulkhead goes in. So all this detail is going to be gone. You don't need to worry about, which is fine. This part here, I believe, is replaced. Yes, it is, I think. Yeah, so we get a replacement part of this, and this, set this to one side, knock the camera off. So I'm at it. This part here is where we remove all the radio detail just to make a simple bulkhead to hold it together. So there's quite a lot of pieces on here that we don't need. We've got the main undercarriage strut parts, and we've got the horizontal stabilizers and ailerons here, ailerons and elevators, should I say. And they're all really nicely molded, and the detail is of a similar fashion as on the wings, so it's quite continuous in regards to all the panel lines being of same size, depth and quality, which is good because that means the detail is consistent across the whole model. We have another set of engines here. Now, I was mistaken as to which ones we're using for the kit, but these are still molded really nicely. We have a second set of propellers here as well. We've got the shorter, sort of chunkier paddle blades, and we've got slightly different front radiator details here as well. We have the tail, another tail here. We've got the top fuselage panel with the radio direction finder. We've got the spinner caps, and we've got the cowling parts here if you want to flare out the cooling. So that's the bulk of the fuselage parts. As with Airfix, there's always a problem in that you get parts coming off the sprue. So you need to be careful when you're taking out the bag that you don't lose any of those, because they could be important. However, as that looks like a cockpit seat, we're probably not going to need it because we haven't got a cockpit. Now, this part here has got your flaps and ailerons on it, I think. Yep. So, and we've also got a load of cockpit parts that we don't need. But they are molded really nicely. There's some undercarriage parts here as well. So there's little ways and burn. There is minimal flashing and minimal cleanup. And we've got nice, reasonable connection points to the sprue, which is fine. And yeah, there's a part where the seats come off. So you need to be wary of that. If you were buying this as the bomber kit, you know, if you've lost any parts, you need to keep a hold of them. This sprue here, oh sorry, there's the main undercarriage legs as well. Nice and stout, and the detail on them will take a wash beautifully. And there is a little bit of flash there. There we go, I never noticed that. So a little bit of cleanup needed, but nothing deadly. Nothing deadly at all. Engines are quite nicely detailed. And should you want to build this kit with the cowlings open, it will make a nice model. We've got some bombs that are going to go in your spares box. We've got some interior weapons for the aircraft, self-defense, and some magazines, engine bearers, exhaust shrouds, coolant pipes, and sundries. Turbocharger by the looks of it. So again, that's a duplicate sprue. And for me, the only reason I've got the engines is to make sure I get all the panels aligned in the prop line properly. I won't be doing much detail work on that. And the final small sprue has got exhaust shrouds, more weaponry, and the part here I'm not quite sure what that is, but I'm sure the instructions will tell us we either need it or we don't. Right, this is the interesting part. This is the Mistel part. So this is the upgrade to the kit, the original Ju-88 bomber kit. And interestingly, I can feel it slightly different feel to the plastic. I don't know if that's because it's a different tooling, but the plastic feels a little more sharper, a little crisper. It's still flexible, but it's just a little bit more substantial than the original kit plastic. The engravings, however, are lovely, and they're in keeping with the original tooling, so you're not going to have a stark difference between the new parts and the old parts, which is really, really good, which means continuity of the build will be very nice. And if we look underside, we can see that there isn't any guide holes molded into the underside as a Tamiya kit, or Modern Academy or Sagawa would probably do, where you just punch through the hole and it's all been aligned for you. So we are going to have to do some pretty accurate measuring. I mean, I know we do have some guides here as to where the main support legs are going to go, but we are going to have to do some measurements to make sure we get it all in the right place. So taking our time when it's in primer, when we can draw on it with a pencil and get it right, is going to be the name of the day. Now, this is the warhead, two halves coming together. So if we take the time, we should easily be able to get the join done properly and eradicated. And then we've got all these fine detailed parts that go around these recessed areas here on the warhead. The tip of the warhead is here, the detonators, 4 of them, so that'll go on nice and make a nice detail. Because it's a tail sitter, we don't have to worry about nose weight, which is fine. But what we are going to have to do is make sure that the surgery we do to the main fuselage matches up with this here. So we might end up with a little bit of filling in here to get a more seamless finish. Not insurmountable, and any modeler with a bit of experience should be able to manage it. And the main mantra will be measure thrice, cut once. So take your time, measure 3 times, make sure you are 100% sure where you're going to cut, and then it's a case of fettling the warhead onto the fuselage. And this is the second part of the upgrade set. This is the mounting points in the tail cradle and the wheel undercarriage doors for the closed position for the BF-109. Again, this is slightly softer plastic. It's more reminiscent of the first plastics, reminiscent of Airfix plastic. It works fine. As I said, I have built a couple of ICM models and their plastics are lovely. Don't flood them with glue because they do react very, very well to Tamiya Extra Thin or Mr. Cement S, and you don't want to lose that lovely detail that they've taken the time to scribe into it. Right, from the JU88 Mistel we then move on to the BF109, and for me this is a complete mystery. I've never looked at this kit before in my life, so I have no idea what like it is. Canopies, and then we've got what, 1, 2, 3 frames. Now instantly I can tell you, I can feel a difference in the quality of the runner. The runners are a lot thinner, and the plastic is of similar flexibility to the JU88 kit. The detail, I'll be honest with you, it's reasonably well subscribed. It's probably lacking a little bit of riveting detail. This will be an older moulding, without a shadow of a doubt. Probably early 2000s, one of ICM's earlier offerings. In all fairness, it's probably going to go together okay. You've got a one-piece tail here. You've got quite nicely moulded in detail on the tail section. You've got some moulded detail on the cockpit section. If we flip it over, the panel lines are nicely scribed. I don't know if my camera is going to pick this up. There we go. The panel lines are nicely scribed, but there's no riveting detail. And there will be rivets on these, so it's something that you could do if you wanted. However, you could get away with it if you didn't want to. We've got quite nice detail on the front of the engine cowling and the sides, but a lot of flash, an awful lot of flash on the kit. So we're going to have to take our time to clean this up. So that's the fuselage. Let's have a look at the wings. What can you say? 3-piece of wings, so a 1-piece lower, 2-piece upper. Very similar to most other ME109 kits. There's more detail on the wings. We've got rivet detail molded in to the panel lines. It's kind of textured. It's maybe not as finished and polished as the fuselage, but it's going to be okay. You could probably take a very nice buffer to that and get a better finish and improve the finish, but you want to go overboard because you'll end up losing the panel lines. You might describe these upper wing surface panel lines as a little trenchy. They're a little deeper than what's on the JU88, so a coat of primer and a rescribe might not go amiss. But it looks like a BF109. It'll paint like a BF109 and it'll finish up like a BF109. So all in all, I think it'll be okay. And realistically, with the measurements that are given in the instructions, if you wanted to replace this for a higher grade kit to match him with the later tooling of the JU88, there's going to be no problem in doing that because you've got the measurements, you know where to drill the holes. Final sprue, Sprue C, is mainly engine parts and cockpit parts. Again, I'll be honest, the detail's probably a little basic and slightly softly molded. There's flash and there's some burring, but there's enough parts there to make up a BF109. So it really will come down to the modeler as to whether they want to use this aircraft or if they want to replace it for a higher tooling kit. I personally, when I build this, will just be building it out of the box with what I've got here, because that's how I like to do modeling. I like just to use what you've got, unless it's a model I really want to put a lot of effort into, enhance as much as possible. I will just use what they've got in. So we've got the cockpit tub, we've got the instrument panel, we have, it looks like a multi-part seat, we've got the engine parts here, engine bearers, we've got some cockpit sundries here, the control column, rudder pedals. Yeah, they're all a little bit flashy, need a little bit of cleanup. They're quite delicate, I would say. This plastic's quite soft, so we're going to have to be careful. We have got the one-piece wingtips, which are here and here. They're a little softly molded, and again, we're going to have to be careful to do some test fitting to make sure we get them fitted well to the wings. The wingtip lights are very softly molded and might need improving a little bit, which is a shame. But then this will be an older kit from ICM, so it won't be up to their current standard. Whether they think to retool it or not, I don't know, but it's certainly something they maybe ought to think about, because it could do with improving a little. So we'll see. I'm actually quite interested to see how this builds up compared to, well, even likes of the basic Tamiya BF109, or an Edard BF109, or even a Hasegawa BF109. Finally, we have got the cockpit glass for the BF109. And looking at it, it's not too bad actually. It's clear. You can see through it well. There's no scratches on it, and there's enough of a ridge for the panel lines. It's going to be easy enough to mask off. We've got a gun sight there, and I'm not sure, maybe an underwing light, a landing light, but yeah, the actual glazing's okay for the BF109. So that's the kit parts. Give me a moment, I shall get them all back in the box, and then we'll get the camera back onto my ugly mug, and we'll do a bit of sort of conclusions and thoughts. So we'll see you in a moment. Well, so there we have it. ICM's new tooled 148 Mistel 1. So thoughts. Tale of two kits, I think. The JU88 and the Mistel tooling is obviously more recent in the ICM timeline than the old BF109 kit. So that's going to present the modeler with, I think, a big quandary of they're going to build a fantastic Mistel representation of Mistel out of the JU88 and the Mistel parts. That's a given. That's going to be a really, really good model. The quandary is, do you put the time and effort into making the ICM provided BF109 a good quality model to match the level of quality you're going to get in the Mistel, or do you just bite the bullet and get an offering from, say, Edard or any other major model manufacturers that have a current BF109F4, I think that's what it was in the instructions, to replace the ICM offering? And that's a big deal actually, because that would add significantly to the price of the kit. Now, as I said when I was reviewing the parts, I'll just be building it with what's in the box. I'm a great believer of doing that, unless it's really, really needed. But yes, it's an older tooling. However, it should build into a reasonable aircraft with a little bit of time and attention. It might take a little bit more time and attention than what you'd need to spend on the JU88 part of the build, but that's modelling, and it's the challenge, and that's what I enjoy. If you put this BF109 up against an earlier Tamiya BF109, yeah, you're going to find similarities, you're going to find differences, but you're still going to end up with two BF109s. So I don't personally see it as a huge problem. The advantage to the way they've done the kit, as opposed to the way other manufacturers might have done it, in that the Mistel parts would have had pre-molded location pins for the support cradle for the BF109 on as a sort of salamander type thing on the back of the JU88 part of the kit. The fact that they haven't done that and they're relying on the modeler to mark out and measure means that if you did want to replace it, you can do that, because you've got the measurements, you know where the holes need to go for the mounting points for the mounting arrangement. So where you detract from not having these pre-made placements to get it really accurate, ICM is still taking the time to give you the option of, well, you can take time to measure it and get it right, well, you can do that with any kit. So there's pros and cons with everything, but as an overall, if we look at it from the simple concept of, is this an interesting modeling subject? Yes, it is. Is it a new tooling of a modeling subject that up to this point usually needed a resin conversion? Yes, it is. So you've alleviated having to work with resin, which is really, really good. Is it from a respected manufacturer? Well, yes, it is, because ICM is now a very respected manufacturer and it's putting out some really, really good kits. And are people going to buy it and build it? Yes, they are. And would I recommend it? Yes, I would. As I said, I've built the JU88 Night Fighter version produced by ICM, and I really, really enjoyed that build. It's a really fantastic model. So the fact that you're having to do a little bit of surgery to remove the cockpit and put on the warhead, some people like me will find that fantastic because I don't have to paint a cockpit, which is great. I don't have to worry about glazing Ju-88 canopies, which is an absolute pain in the butt. So in that respect, a little bit of work is going to result in a quicker and easy build there. But the time you're not having to spend in the cockpit and the glazing and whatnot of the Ju-88, you're going to have to put into the BF-109 just to lift it that little bit to bring it up to the same level as the Ju-88. But as an overall, this is a really good kit. And I think it's going to be a well sought after kit, and it's probably going to be very well represented on the display benches at shows and club competitions as you go around different areas of the hobby. So I have to say I probably recommend this kit. As I said, I was lucky. I bought it as part of a birthday gift. But for the price I paid for it and for the amount of plastic and time you're going to enjoyment you're going to get out of this kit, I think it represents reasonably good value for money. If I remember rightly, this kit is retailing around the £45 to £50 mark UK at this time, so we're talking August 2023. Those prices may change from region and over time, but for that money, for the amount of plastic you get in the box and for the quality of the parts you get in the box, it's a no-brainer. If you're interested into these subjects, just buy it. There are other Mistel models out there. I know Revell do one with a different airframe. I will be lying if I told you what it was, but we're not going to worry about those. When it comes to this kit, I have to say it's recommended. I will be building this, and I'll probably try to build this as soon as I finish my current build, which is the Tacom Apache. So yeah, highly recommended. If you've got any questions or comments, please take time to put them down. I will read them and will respond. If you've gotten to this far in my ramblings, thank you for sticking with me. If you feel like subscribing, then please feel free to subscribe. I very much appreciate everyone that takes the time to give me a bit of support. And yeah, if you want to click the notification bell, you'll be notified of my next upcoming videos. So until next time, guys, happy modeling, take care, and cheers.